So our next speaker is Nicole Pereira. Her is a law graduate from Reading University, UK, who passed the Certificate in Legal Practice, CLP, as well as the Bar Professional Training course. She has been admitted to the Bar of England and Wales, and since then, she has completed her chambering in Malaysia. She now awaits being admitted as an advocate and solicitor of the High Court of Malaysia. During her years in the legal profession, she discovered a passion for championing women's rights as well as the rights of children and has gone on to publish numerous articles on sexual harassment in Malaysia. While waiting to be admitted as an advocate and solicitor of the High Court of Malaysia, she joined MIRM in November 2020, which she has since found to be an eye-opening experience. MIRM, Make It Right movement, is the CSR arm of the Brickfields Asia College, the nation's #1 law school. MIRM has enabled her to pursue her passion in community service while exposing her to the realities and difficulties of day-to-day life for many marginalized communities in Malaysia. So Nicole strives to dedicate her life and legal training, which she has been fortunate in obtaining, towards ensuring that women and children have the opportunity to live a life that is free and without fear. This is something MIRM has enabled her and is continuously training her to do. She is Malaysian of Indian descent. She has tan skin and shoulder-length curly hair, which she has highlighted copper brown. She has styled her hair in such a way today whereby she has clipped her fringe up. She wears dark green glasses, has on red lipstick, and is wearing a pinkish peach blouse. So tonight, she will be talking about to live a life that is free and without fear, breaking the shackles of sexual harassment. So now I'll turn over the floor to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And firstly, before I begin, as the last speaker, I would just like to thank Dr. Martha for giving us this opportunity to speak on topics we feel very strongly about. It is truly a privilege to be here today. Now, before I dive into my topic, let me tell you a story of what led my colleagues and I, Thirubarasu and Kuan Manukaran, to research further and to advocate against sexual harassment. It all began when during my years in active practice, we were approached by women and men with regards to the issue of sharing of intimate images. Now here what had happened was that when these victims were in relationships, they had sent their nude images to their partner. But when the relationship soured and ended, these partners then went on to circulate their nude images. Now, when these victims approached us, they were absolutely shattered. And it was very heartbreaking for us as well, who were working with them in our journey to seek justice for them. Because we realized that society was so quick to point fingers and blame the victim. And in this day and age, where technology is so advanced, online sexual harassment has become so prevalent. And in this regard, the circulation of nude images has become so easy because it is just a click away. And it is very important to note that sexual harassment is not about sexual intimacy. It is about power over their victims. And it's done with the aim of humiliating, degrading, embarrassing, and demeaning their victims. Now, sexual harassment is so prevalent in the 21st century, and there is no industry or institution that is immune for it, for it happens in our schools and universities, companies, restaurants, movie sets, religious institutions, and it can be even seen happening amongst those holding political positions. I myself have friends who have gone through it, who were sexually harassed by their bosses, and when they spoke out, they were fired. So how do we change things? For the root cause of it is gender inequality. It is both the cause of sexual harassment and the consequence of it. So what can we do to change things? And the first thing to do is to understand the problem of sexual harassment. Now, what is sexual harassment? A brief description of it would be conduct of a sexual nature that is unwanted and unwelcome. So let me reiterate, unwanted and unwelcome sexual conduct. And it manifests itself in many forms: verbal, physical, gestural, visual. I will not go into detailing what these forms are, for I feel we generally do understand what it amounts to, but I will explain a little about psychological sexual harassment. Now, it is relentless, unwanted social invitations, such as proposals for dates, physical intimacy, and unwanted constant texting. Psychological in the sense that women start to feel anxious when they hear their phone ring and when they feel vibrations of a message coming in. And it's so bad in the sense that even if you block the number, they will just change their number and use a new number to contact you. So that is what it means to be psychologically harassed. Then comes the next big question of why. Why does sexual harassment still keep happening? And to understand this, research has shown us that institutions and social settings with these three characteristics allow it to happen. That is male-dominated industries, industries that are hierarchical, and industries and societies that enable and are forgiving of bad behavior. Now let me look at industries first. Male-dominated industries where aggressive dominant behavior is common, where sexualized talk and crude jokes are considered cool by some men because they feel that it allows them to be part of the in crowd, where they feel that they are popular and desirable when they have their way with women, irrespective of whether it's consensual or not. So in these hyper-masculine settings, when women rise up the ranks, these men can feel threatened. So it is important to note that sometimes the most common form of sexual harassment is gender harassment. It is not and has rarely is about sexual desire. It is about communicating to women in subtle or not so subtle ways that this is not their place and that they do not belong. And why do they not belong in supervisory roles? Because it is deemed that they violate traditional female ideals by holding what is considered a man's job or behaving in a manner that is considered masculine, such as being assertive or dominant or aggressive to get things done. So when women are rising up in the world, sexual harassment becomes a way to knock them down again. And it is also more likely to take place where there are large power differences, hierarchical organizations, male-dominated organizations, where these men are able to exert power over individuals who are dominant on them, who are dependent on them, who are dependent on men to survive, such as vulnerable women, children, refugees, and the stateless. Because it is very hard for vulnerable communities and vulnerable women to say no. And when they do say no, it is not taken into account. Their no is not taken for an answer. And when they do say no, they stand to risk their livelihoods and their means of survival. We have seen it happen in charitable organizations as well, where vulnerable communities are dependent on these charities to provide them with their means of income, to provide them with their rice bowl. And if the assistance is taken away from these communities, they are unable to provide for themselves, they are unable to provide for their families. So that is why it is very difficult for them to say no. When a woman is working for an important or a powerful man, he holds the key to her future, and sometimes when it comes to drafting reference letters or promotions or increments in salary or basically job security, women are expected to keep quiet and accept whatever bad behavior is imparted on them. And the spotlight was actually on sexual harassment just a few weeks ago. My family and I, we were watching CNN, and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, resigned after New York's Attorney General released an independent result which found that he had sexually harassed at least 11 women by kissing them, groping, insinuating remarks about their looks, and created a work environment that was rife with fear and intimidation. Now, this is so shocking because he was someone who was actually advocating women's rights and was a supporter for the Me Too movement. Yet, see what happens behind closed doors. Men who we feel we can trust, who we look up to, perpetuate and abuse women too, which is why the Me Too movement is such an important one, for it emboldened women to come out and speak when society and their legal framework has failed them. And that is why communities should support women when they make allegations of sexual harassment. Now then there is society. And in our Asian culture, it appears to be forgiving of bad behavior. We are very quick to point fingers at the victim and say that, oh, she behaved in a loose manner. It is because of her clothing. She didn't cover up, or she was too friendly with this particular perpetrator. So this permissive, forgiving behavior further perpetuates further bad behavior to take place. In Malaysia, I'll give you an example. A 17-year-old girl, Ain Husniza Saiful Nizam, if you do a quick Google search, this case will come out. She used TikTok to call out her teacher who made a joke about rape. A teacher who told his students that if they wish to rape a woman, rape those who are above 18. Do not rape girls who are 18 and under. Now, this is such a shocking story to learn of, because he was a teacher, he's dealing with students, the future of our country, impressionable students. And it should have been his duty to educate students on sexual harassment and condemn it, rather than further perpetuate the notion that women exist for the pleasure of men. And this joke, it could normalize bad behavior, inappropriate behavior, and cultivate a hostile environment within our schools, which could potentially lead to sexual violence. And now, while Ain had many supporters, a lot of us took to social media to support her and encourage her to speak up along with her friends. Her family was also very supportive, but there exists a certain segment in our community who condemned her. And that is what I found very shocking as well. There were even some of them who threatened to rape her, who said that she was blowing things out of proportion, she was exaggerating, it was just a joke. She should not have taken it the wrong way. A joke about rape is okay. So what happens if one of the students acted upon that joke? What is society going to say then? It was encouraged by the teacher. He did say what? Rape those who are above 18. So what if the student then went on to do exactly that? Now, what needs to be done? What can our leaders and members of parliament do, and what can we as individuals do? In leadership roles, we need more women representatives at the top levels. Now, while it's important to note that women in management or government roles in itself do not eliminate the problem, as women can harass men as well. Men can be victims too. But what we have found and what research has shown us, it is that it is more prevalent in hyper-masculine environments. So that is why we need more women in leadership roles, because we need to level the playing field. And this will then promote gender equality and more inclusive and diverse practices, which can do a lot to alter these hyper-masculine environments. And what can we as individuals do? If we hear or see inappropriate conduct, behavior, or statements made by our friends, by our work colleagues, by our bosses, it is a duty, it's a moral duty to call it out. We should not just brush it aside and be like, oh, it's just a joke. He didn't mean anything by it. It is a moral duty to call it out because you never know when the next victim could be. It could be you. It could be your daughter in the future. It could be your son. It could be your best friend. And it will hurt when it's someone you know personally. So why not take a stand to protect those that you can protect? Why not take a stand to use your voice for good and stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves? We also need to look at our country's policies and legislations. Now, what is to be noted is that when we look at what our country is doing to protect women, we need to see if there are adequate legislations against sexual harassment, if there are clear definitions, disciplinary proceedings in place, and if retribution for speaking up is prohibited. Now, in Malaysia, for example, we are looking to table the sexual harassment bill in Parliament, but due to the pandemic, it has been delayed. But what this bill would do is it would bring in mandatory oversight procedures to ensure companies handle complaints properly, and it will protect employees as well. It will establish a special tribunal to look into these cases, and cases can also be brought for sexual harassment allegations perpetuated outside the workplace as well as online. And the reason why this gained a lot of attention is because so many women started talking about it. A lot of the NGOs were pushing the government to table the bill in Parliament. So when collectively we speak, people will start to take notice. The government will have to take notice. And that is how we develop, and that is how our communities and our countries and our societies progress. If you wish to find out what are the needs of your communities and what you can do to raise awareness on sexual harassment, the best means to do so would be to connect with your NGOs, women rights organizations, or human rights organizations in your respective countries to see what can be done, what better policy should you be advocating for, and what are the existing gaps in your legislations and in your policies. In your workplace, check and see if your companies or organizations have sexual harassment policies, complaint or investigation procedures in place. Because these companies are not obligated to have these policies. It is not compulsory. Like in Malaysia, it's not compulsory, but it is encouraged. So if these companies do not have it, advocate for it. Now let me look at a different spectrum to this whole issue of sexual harassment. What do you do when a victim or a child approaches you with an allegation of sexual harassment? What do you say to them? We need to be very mindful of the words we use because we do not want to seem insensitive, and we do not want them to be afraid to come and speak out about it. So what I have experienced is never say that I understand what you are going through, because how will I understand unless I have been sexually harassed myself? And even if I have gone through it, we are all unique individuals whereby we process our trauma differently, so we will never truly understand what that person is going through. So instead of saying something like that, we should be saying things like, I believe you. It took a lot of courage for you to tell me about this. Reassure them by telling them that it is not their fault, that they didn't do anything to deserve it, and that they are not alone. That you care about them, that you are there to support and listen to them and help in any way that you can. Now, just a word of caution, when you say help in any way that you can, what you can do is to bring it to the attention of the authorities, or if it involves a child, to contact Child Protection Services. Never personally confront the perpetrator, because you could just be putting yourself and the victim in harm's way. So do not try to be a hero. That should never be something that you do. But what I said, what you can do is to inform the authorities. And now, what to do if you are a victim, if you have experienced harassment, assault, or abuse in any form or manner. If it is your organization, inform HR. For companies are to take these complaints seriously, and they usually have a complaints mechanism in place. There's something called a domestic inquiry where they have to look into it. They have to establish an independent body to investigate your complaint. But if your HR are not taking this issue seriously, you can then go on to make a police report. But I know it can be a rather daunting process to approach, to make your way to the police station, to speak to a police officer and narrate what has happened to you. That is why, again, it is very important to connect with your NGOs, because you may not know it, but there is a wealth of resources and support teams out there. They can help you with obtaining shelter. If you need to move out from your current environment and stay elsewhere, they can help you with shelter. They can help you move jobs. They can help you with applying to different organizations. If you have children, they can assist you with that. If you wish to make a police report, a lot of these NGOs will accompany you to the police station. They will also assist you in making reports to your companies, to HR. But what is important to note is that these NGOs have professionals in place that are trained in regards to these kind of sex-related abuse cases. They have therapists, psychologists in place that can assist you mentally as well to heal from the trauma. And then there's also the other spectrum of those who are unable to speak out. And what I have seen in certain charitable organizations, where their livelihood depends on the assistance by the organization, it can be very difficult to voice out the abuse that has been taking place. And that is why these NGOs again play an important role, because they will protect your confidentiality if it is needed, and they will help you by removing you from that abusive environment. So how do we change things? I will just end by saying that when you break the silence, you are free. No longer do you need to live in fear of what will happen to you, because the power these perpetrators have over you vanishes, and the shackles that they have used to bind you slips away. So today is the time to say, enough is enough, Me Too, and sexual harassment ends here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So for the questions, you touched up on psychological sexual harassment. So what are the signs to look for when that is currently happening?
Okay, so I'll just give a personal example. Psychological sexual harassment is when you have already indicated to the person messaging you that you're not interested, but they keep sending you text messages after text messages, asking you out, sending you inappropriate images, calling you at all hours of the night, and keep requesting for intimate physical relations. Now, you have already indicated that you're not interested, but you might receive 30, 40, 50 messages a day. This is something known as psychological harassment, because they have not physically harmed you, they are not in front of you, but they have affected you mentally, because it can create a feeling of anxiety. Even if you block their number or you block them from all means of communication, like email, social media, they will still find a way to contact you, like changing their number and calling your number. So what some of us had to do, what I had to do, what some of my friends had to do was to change our number. We had to get a new SIM card so that they really cannot contact us anymore. And what else? They will create fake accounts, fake social media accounts, to add you and things like that. So it's a psychological game, because it affects you mentally, that you start feeling scared when your phone rings or your house phone rings, or when you receive gifts at your doorstep. This anxiety is the psychological effects that arises from these types of harassment. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
So what are some red flags that we have to look out for when signs of sexual harassment is coming up in our relationships?
Okay, in relationships, from what I have observed as well, is when, like I said, harassment can occur between genders, male or female. It doesn't mean that only women are sexually harassed. So in relationships, the signs to look out for is when they do not respect your wishes. Sometimes you don't have to say no, but just by your body language, you're already indicating that you're uncomfortable about the way something is done. But the person keeps pushing your boundaries, so it becomes so toxic that you feel that you are not able to express yourself, that when you try to talk about what you are comfortable with, what your boundaries are, it is laughed at, it is not taken seriously. These are the very beginning signs that you are in an abusive relationship, and one that is sexually abusive, because the boundaries of your body are not respected. And it will progress. Like, from what I've seen, a lot of victims that we have spoken to, they keep saying that, oh, it's okay, it will change, or my partner will change, I just need to be a better partner, or more understanding of my partner's needs, and things will get better. It never gets better. It will deteriorate to a point where you just do not have autonomy over your wants, your needs, or your body anymore, because the partner will be doing as they please. They'll be treating you as they please. There's no respect. So when there's no respect in that relationship, the abuse becomes enormous. It will be perpetuated, and it will keep continuing until you make that decision to leave. So to just summarize, one of the red flags is when your opinions and thoughts and your feelings are not respected, because that will just escalate into worse forms of abuse.
Okay, so last question. It's actually from someone who commented on the chat. Half the time, the ones who have been assaulted want to ignore what happened to them, because being honest with themselves means what happened was real. How do we build them such that they are not in denial?
Okay, that's a very good question, actually. But to really look at it, if a person or anyone, irrespective of gender, is harassed or abused, it doesn't need to be sexual harassment as well, physical abuse, emotional abuse. It has to be from themselves first. There's only so much we can do to try and help somebody, but the first step has to be taken by them. So there has to be a sense of acknowledgement that this happened to me. So if you know of someone who is going through some kind of traumatic event in their life, and they keep brushing it off, like they do not want to acknowledge that this happened to them, it is best not to force it, but what you can do is to be supportive. Because from what I've noticed, there will come a time when they will break down. You can only deny that something has happened for so long before you totally crack inside. And that is when they will need the support of their family, their peers, or their environment, not to blame them, not to shame them, but to help them overcome this. So it's a very tricky situation, because if they are in denial, we cannot go then and force them to come out of it. The first step to recovery has to be the acknowledgement that something has taken place and that I need help.
Okay, so there aren't any other questions anymore. So thank you so much, Nicole. So thank you to our speakers for tonight, Jamie, Dr. Riga, and Nicole, for sharing your truths with us. So I think it's time for the breakout room.